Why, hello there. I guess it's time to continue our journey into Myst clones with games lost in the Mysts of Time. Maybe you'd say that this might be a majestic journey, but for that, we'll have to go to space again. I'm the king of the world! Woohoo! This episode is going to be about the Majestic Trilogy. Ah, yes, Bethesda. I'm sure you know of their obvious stuff. This takes us to Istvan Pely. He specializes in 3D graphics and did the graphics, art, and dungeon design for games like Oblivion, Skyrim, and Fallout 3 and 4. Of course, to get in a position like that, he needed to get more experience. This takes us to the mid-90s. He was in Loyola. He was in Loyola University studying computer science. However, he wanted more art rather than the technical focus on the courses. He was only 19 years old, taking classes full-time while working part-time as a media consultant, learning 3D Studio, Photoshop, Premiere, and Director. He said he got bored with school and that the industry moves too quickly, so he wanted to figure out game development for himself. So, is this going to be a majestic journey, or should it crash like the Titanic? Stay tuned to find out.
Who's that pointing and clicking his way to internet fame? It might be a little too cool for your mainstream kind of games, but if you like retro consoles and obscure PC stuff, then you might just be hip enough for this pretentious hipster.
This takes us to the manual to explore the plot. There is a ship named the SS Majestic. It is a classic luxury liner in space. Istvan said he wanted to play off the contrast with a sci-fi universe and an Edwardian-style cruise ship. Edwardian? Why, those are the type of people I escort when I carriage away. Yeah. Hopefully he'll shut up soon. She was Earth's finest pleasure cruiser, a crowning achievement in space travel, a vessel of unprecedented luxury and comfort. She then set sail from Earth's harbor and never returned. Well, I guess it did sink like the Titanic. Review's over. After a while, they thought they would never find it again. But then there was a faint signal, somewhere within the Pleiades Nebula. The closest field archaeologist is then sent to investigate. You then find it, the remains. You were given 5 entry points, and this is where it gets weird. Do you see those numbers on the right side? That's what you can control. You control remote-controlled probes, known as VR nodes. They interact with the ship through virtual reality feedback. You can change between them at any time. You then select one of the few points, and the node flies away. You then see the letters T, L, and S. The torch cuts through the bulkhead and any obstacles. The L is the link which links towards computer consoles and data pads, and S allows you to scan objects as you come across them. You can change between the VR nodes at any time, but they cannot interact with each other due to interference. Immediately when I first entered the ship, I kinda got vibes that it was a cross between Myst and System Shock. It's heavy in atmosphere, and music is rare, but super effective when it comes in. As you find the PDAs and computers to link, they have a personal link. So yes, just like both of these games, these are used to answer some questions regarding the plot and what exactly happened. Most puzzles are solved by writing stuff down. Passwords, passcodes, and general information. You basically gotta switch back and forth between nodes quite often, getting the information needed at one end of the ship, and going to the other node to use said information. The other puzzles consist of riddles. I mean, look at how easy they are.
Why, I have a riddle for you. Who is someone who is quite intelligent, but not as much as he says he is. He also gets up at 4 a.m. before the sunrise at every morning. What is he?
Ah, God, you again. What is it now?
A pretentious hipster.
It was quite fascinating to see the remains of the ship. Floating items, broken items. It was all quite the sight to behold. I then reached the lobby and come across this. What? An alien? Turns out it exists in another dimension. You then explore many, and I mean many areas. This is where I realized there's a huge flaw with this. It's a navigation system. It's fine going forward and to the sides. It's going backwards that's the issue. You gotta click the arrow on the bottom right to reverse the camera, and then you can go backwards. It gets annoying when you enter a large room because by reflex you would shift left to right, but with this you have to turn around. It's honestly a terrible navigation system. Upon exploring more of the ship, it was interesting seeing the contrast of the broken down employer bridge part of the ship versus the super formal part meant for clients. I then realized another problem. I spent like 90% of the game just using one VR node. As you find more and more personal logs, you find out about people having this sort of artifact, with no other info for now. It's being held by the Baron. You then get a digital link of someone that is in the ship. Maybe they're alive? They uploaded some data to the probe so they can see what you can see, and then provide information when they see anything special. It's basically the way for you to get hints. Also, running into this room, keep in mind about this. It's a cool reference for later on. It's the Baron's room, and he talks about the artifact and him trying to hide it. The plot gets more and more intriguing as it goes on. That's basically it for this, just exploring these places, and it comes down to more to the experience itself. But there is one huge twist in this later on. You get an item called a phase viewer, which lets you look into another dimension or phase.
It's not a phase, Mom.
This is where it starts to get intense, but they are spoilers, so click here to get to the next game. You gotta explore all these invisible enemies, using more environments, crushing them in the cargo hold, or using various items in the kitchen. Eventually, you get the artifact, but not without a fight. Ah, great, they took it! It turns out that yes, it's about phases and the artifact, or I guess now it's a device, and it lets you travel between them. It then gets really intense. I mean, look what happens when I enter the kitchen. This is where it gets interesting because for once, you really gotta utilize the multi-node system. You then stop this alien with kind of a clever puzzle, but oh god, didn't expect that to happen either. Well, you now gotta get the artifact before the aliens do. You can then see how these nodes look like.
Hello, I'm Captain Pompous, and I am here to salute this drone that has passed away in our services.
After a few more puzzles on destroying the aliens, you then enter their phase. It's obvious what we gotta do with the ship. Get captured by aliens, of course. Nah, we gotta find an explosive device, and use our torch on it, destroying everything in its path, including the Majestic. Talk about an intense ending. Now, time to judge on whether or not this is a Myst clone. Number 1. Yes, this is first person. It gets an Atris.
Keep moving it to the right.
2. Little to no inventory. You do use more items than the other Myst games, so I give it a Isha.
Hello.
3. Mostly just interacting, but you still have a few more commands. But it's not like LucasArts or Sierra level though. so I'll give it a Yisha.
Come on.
4. No protagonist. You don't know who you are, but it's not perfect as you control those droids. Still, a minor complaint. It gets a Catherine.
Breathtaking, isn't it?
5. Emphasis on atmosphere and isolation. I'd say it has about as much interaction as Myst, except for the voice that's with you. So, I'll give it half a Catherine.
Breathtaking, isn't it?
Plot, they pretty much spell it out for you most of the time, but you find details in personal logs, so it gets half a Catherine.
Breathtaking, isn't it?
And logic-based puzzles. Definitely that, barely any inventory puzzles. So it gets a Catherine.
Breathtaking, isn't it?
I would say that this qualifies as a Myst clone. It's a simple game. It took me about an hour and a half to beat it, and it has a terrible navigation system. But there is something I noticed with this. There is tons of potential. Perhaps with these 2 sequels, we will see if that potential was met. This then takes us to our next entry, Sin Factor, also known as Symbiocom. This time there's more to the team than just Istvan. There's a writer named Sherbin Young and a musician and sound editor named Seth Jones. It's published this time by, well, Bethesda. It's set in the same universe as Majestic, but barely has any connection to it. It's a sort of pseudo-sequel. Istvan said he wanted to get away from the cliches of sci-fi adventure games. One that is a more realistic future, and with a corporate conspiracy with no aliens. It almost sounds like a cliche of cyberpunk stuff though, although he admits it. He said it was compared to Soylent Green, but he never watched it. Honestly, the same with me. He said that he was still in college when he made this, but he managed his time a lot more efficiently and learned of many of the pitfalls of the first Majestic game. This one was a surprise, because it didn't seem to be praised at all. It was considered way too tough and obscure of its challenges, but praised for its plot and the 3D graphics. It's set in a world where they want to blend minds and machines seamlessly by using a product called Simplants, created by the company SynSim. However, they are only in the test trial of the synthetic implants. These implants are used to enhance cognitive experiences. It's embedded in the brain system and gives a databank and more reasoning skills. Cut to the Deep Space Cruise IST Rident. While it's just going around, a bunch of ships come in. What happens after? An attack. It went down from 163 passengers and crew to just 1. You play that lone survivor. Immediately you can view your items, status, and a database which has you searching up various terms and concepts. Right out of the way, yeah, it's a shame that the UI is like this and that the game itself is so small, but it is obviously from an efficient programming standpoint. It also provides a good place for the menu and for the subtitles, and considering who made it, it kinda gave you Pip-Boy vibes. I also noticed how much better the navigation system is. You have the arrows to do 360-degree turns. You then click forward whenever you want to do so. It also includes animations every time you go to the next area. It provides that initial hook so well from the get-go. The intriguing plot, once again with so many questions, and they provide some thrilling segments like the gravity all screwing up. It is similar to Majestic where you find the plot through personal logs. It is in a way that piques your interest. You then go amongst the chaos here, trying to find answers and to get out of the ship. This leads to the inventory puzzles.
Inventory puzzles? Why, that is not very Myst-like.
Anyway. They become interesting, like using a mine to blow up a glass wall to be able to go through it. It does seem like a bit of an overkill though. There is more of a narrative as well. It's not really an inner monologue, but eventually you have a brain implant that you place inside that's kind of like your sidekick. They don't really come across as annoying, and it helps add to the narrative. After exploring the ship, going through yet even more passcode puzzles, you then have your own shuttle, using that to finally escape. This then shows a weird setup for a game like this, but it works. It's split up into episodes with each episode being in a different location. Episode 2 takes you to a more humble place. It's an empty beacon with ragged, patched together walls. Perhaps you may find life there? Well, not really. It's more like a gas station here, with one robot that you can chat with.
Welcome to Plaspo. Who the hell are you? Well, it's not important really. I'm Rendell. I can give you fuel, armaments, and pleasant conversation, but that's about it. Oh say, it's funny you arrived just now. You just missed 2 other passerbys. Well, I didn't say it was hilarious. They were coming from the exact same coordinates as you, battleships I think. Do you know them? Well, it doesn't matter. They're gone now.
Well, I guess you can count it as a form of life. Looking at a notepad, you find out about some people that just came here. Perhaps from those ships that attacked yours? You try to find out for yourself. This does lead to some interactions which are fun, but one part that turned me off was how to do this puzzle. It was just way too illogical. You see these pipes? Seems pointless, huh? Well, you need money. So it's time for pixel hunting. You take your credit computer and hack it by using the pipes to increase the amount. How the hell are you supposed to figure that out? The next part though, let's just say it also lacks some subtlety. Now, there are barely any areas in this, but this is probably the most challenging part to me. I got no idea how one is supposed to figure out all this stuff on their own. Despite all that, this was still an entertaining segment. You then enter the Carswell colony, and this is where it gets real. This is when that feeling of isolation kicks in, since you wouldn't expect a place like this to be so empty. Looking at the link, it says all the residents are still inside? I wonder what happened to them. I then start exploring, and in a computer console I find this.
Finally, somebody's here. I'm trapped in the control room. You need to get the elevator online.
Really creepy actually, and yes, quite Myst-like. I then enter someone's room, seeing the sign of the Majestic, and what's this? Music. Something's coming up, isn't it? Honestly, it shows how well this game accomplishes an atmosphere because this part legit freaked me out. You then solve these fairly simple yet engaging puzzles. I then do what this dude requested and go back to the console. This is where most of the story starts to unravel.
Good job. I'll remove the locks and I'll be...
Oh, of course that would happen. Hope he's okay. Oh, never mind. He has a simplant in his head, one that is still alive, but the body is dead. With that place being abandoned, the simplant is forever stuck in limbo. Well, that is quite sad. What is the logical place to go to afterwards? The Sim headquarters. I guess it's just a matter of walking to the front door, huh? Well, that didn't work. The solution is quite simple. Just do this epic jump. And oh god, it was about to fall down too. You'd never make moves like this in Myst, huh? This leads to what is probably one of my favorite puzzles in this. There's a digital clipboard in the distance. You basically have to choose the right weights until it matches yours. You can access what your weight is in the status section of the user interface. You then enter the warehouse, and it has this cool acid trip part when you pretend you are warehouse inventory, making your way once again through an isolated and atmospheric place. You get this message.
You're a difficult person to catch up with. Don't be alarmed. I've been following you since you escaped from the ride. I was hoping to get in contact with you before now, but things got complicated. Send this message ahead. Teach you got to Sim before me. Say formal introductions for later. Right now, all you have to know is something big has been held. Something horrible. It all began here at Sim.
Mystery!
It then shows another aspect of the puzzles, where the database actually becomes useful. You enter stuff related to lore, and in this case it's a book that you found. You then use that to open a safe. Make sure you read everything that you link into, and read it carefully. You slowly get more and more info provided by the plot, and honestly, I prefer it over something like Myst. At least the first part, and just in that aspect. Not to mention, once again, just how much I love the atmosphere of this. I mean, look at how chilling this room is.
It is the age. The sin factor.
Once again, this is spoilers, so click on this to get to the next game. It takes you closer and closer to where the simplants are made, such as the company's headquarters, which is still all abandoned except for a few dead bodies. You then try to leave the headquarters, and there's some action. Ships are chasing you. Right at this part is when the intensity and stakes drive way up and make this super intense. You then enter the final episode, the facility used to create the Sin Sims. Not to mention the ship crashes. Can't get out of here. Straight in this underground facility. Not sketchy at all. This part basically gets light on the puzzles, but I feel like it was a good conclusion. The puzzles get weird, like how to distract nodes that are chasing you, and sometimes you just gotta be violent. Then, you find it. The place where the simplants are being placed in people. And who's this? The villain of the story. There are times when you have to do your best to stop him, and of course with the stunts you do, you even start hurting yourself, thus increasing the stakes. The ending is probably obvious. There's only one thing to do. I was honestly surprised how atmospheric and overall fantastic this entry is, especially for one done by a small crew. It almost came across as a horror game at times. I'd kinda called like a more peaceful version of System Shock 2.
Peace out, Shonen.
But, is it a Myst clone? 1. Yeah, it's always first person. It gets an Atris.
Keep moving it to the right.
2. It has some inventory, probably even more than the first part. I'll give it half a Isha.
Come on.
3. Lack of commands. It's mostly just linking and you don't have the torch thing like in the first part. So it gets an Atris.
Keep moving it to the right.
4. No protagonist. That is true, but you have the simplant with you most of the time. So it gets a Isha.
Come on.
5. It definitely does the atmosphere and isolation the best. It makes it very effective when you come across someone else, but it kinda gets ruined by the final act. It gets half an Atris.
Keep moving it to the right.
6. The plot. It unravels itself in a very similar way to Myst, so it gets an Atris.
Keep moving it to the right.
7. This has mostly logic-based puzzles, but some are inventory-based or even pixel hunting. Ugh. So it gets a Isha.
Come on.
All in all, this is most definitely a Myst clone and a hidden gem. This leads to Zero Critical, which is perhaps the most polarizing entry in the series. The hilarious part is going to the website Just Adventure. In 1999, it was given an F, while in 2000 it was reviewed once again and it got an A-. Why the huge change in the score? Well, a big reason would be the people who played the previous entries would hate the change with this. Let's see how this starts out. Well, that's certainly a setup. You begin by being dropped off in a place called Rayome 1. You are taken to a research lab there, trying to solve the murder. You play as Chat Ruler, an ITC agent who is going on his first task to investigate the homicide. It then starts like this. Well, honestly, this looks kinda rough, but again, a very small team was involved with this. The people look weird though, even for its time and budget, and the environments are drab. but considering its sci-fi setting, that would kind of make sense.
What is this? Third person? More people to interact with? Conversational options? How is this a Myst clone? Why are you putting this in our series, hipster?
Well, Pompous, we will probably figure this out when I talk about my Myst adventures later on. Well, hopefully. But Uru was third person.
Maybe you're just too lazy to review the rest of the Myst series.
I guess the best way to explain this is that it gives freeware vibes. But then again, I shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Let's see how the game actually is. You immediately encounter other people, which is such a strange turn for the series. They give their usual shtick, but you can tell that they're all hiding something. It's honestly a great setup, and the dialogue itself really shines through. I'm frankly surprised, as this has the writing quality of a bigger budget game. The only strange part is that when you choose the topics, some of them aren't even capitalized.
Consistency!
You then access your ITC fuel unit at any time, giving you the setup of the plot and the previous conversations. You then see what everyone has to say about everyone else. It's a different sort of atmosphere, but one that is also accomplished so well. The music, along with the sounds of the fans and the computers making their noises, somehow accomplishes it quite well. The puzzles get quite grim. You find this body in the meat cooler, since that's the only place they can put them in, and the hand is attached to something. You gotta raise the temperature to put it up, and now's a connection to the previous parts. You get the sim scanner. Of course, I lowered the temperature again afterwards. I didn't want the meat to go bad. They provide a nice system to make sure you don't miss anything. When you complete your tasks, you can sleep, and the game won't let you when there's still stuff to do. I've always been a fan of games that do not do unwinnable situations, since I just kind of find that cheap. It provides that hook. For example, look at what's happening to Roger here. Oh damn, not creepy at all. It then gets worse. Your shuttle gets delayed. I guess you're stuck here with all the people who are clearly hiding stuff. Yep, not suspicious at all. This is what shines the most for me in this game, the dialogue. I believe that most point-and-click games should provide a well-written plot and escapism to the in-game world, and I feel like this accomplishes both quite well. It's funny because I'm not really into plots for films. It is fortunate in this case because it is the bulk of the game. The puzzles are very simple, it's just a matter of applying the right items or codes at different places. And of course, slipping in sleeping pills into someone's coffee. Most of it is just talking to people. Intense things happen to them, such as the voices of what might be the Simplants, and a suspicious character coming in later.
Why, hipster, you can join me as I carriage away. I could strike up all the interesting conversations, and we can have plenty of food breaks.
Oh my god, just shut up, Pompous! As you slowly find out exactly what is being done in the lab, this is when the game goes from good to great. You eventually get the ability to go to more locations. But, the voices! Upon reaching the next location, there is this, who knows what that is. Perhaps there might finally be a connection to the other parts of the trilogy? Well, that is the case. It's the Majestic ship. Of course, with that, twists come in. The next part is spoilers. You can skip here to see the conclusion of the video, or just finish it from here if you hate Pompous just as much as I do. Eventually you come across the head doctor with a grave, saying that she lost someone on this ship. It's all starting to come together, especially with her utilizing a sort of dimension thing in the lab. Could this mean that she's also trying to access the other phases? Well, it's time for sleep anyways. Oh no! Well, time to start day 4 of this. Of course, with this there's paranoia, more pileups of bodies, and Fane holding a gun against anyone that would come near. In summary, you finally have access to other rooms where you can find information. Oh, love? Yes, love conquers all. The phaser was also opened. Well, what would anyone do in this situation? I go in, of course, and you find a familiar room. This will show the conversation at the same time, but just listen to that. How atmospheric is this music? If there's one thing Istvan shines well in, it's creating an effective final act. Going inside the actual Majestic ship, since that's where the Doctor was looking at, you look at the same place, just in a different phase, and something is going on. Anyways, you can finally see what the phasers are used for, to get the Majestic back into this phase so that she can see her love. It is a bit cheesy, but I don't know. Thanks to the game's atmosphere, I found this part actually quite effective. Entering the Majestic during this phase is when it gets borderline surreal. Seeing all the aliens, but finding who her love is. The Baron, someone who's also stuck in limbo, a theme that Istvan also likes to explore. Bringing in the Majestic will do untold damage, and this is why an effective plot can work so well, especially with a game in this genre. I had to start blowing it up, and just seeing those numbers move had my heart bouncing out of my chest. I can tell this was a special entry at this point. I mean, hell, it makes sense too, because a review that gave this an F even said that the plot of it is quite great. What a great ending to this trilogy. It was cathartic. If you don't mind brushing past the gameplay and graphical flaws, and just want to go through an engaging plot, I highly recommend this. But, is this a Myst clone? 1, it's third person, it gets a Cirrus.
Oh, yes!
2, you got quite a bit of inventory, so an Akinar.
Screw you.
3, you're interacting with commands but also using items on said commands, so it gets an Akinar.
Screw you.
4, you know who the protagonist is, it gets a Cirrus.
Oh, yes!
5, it has the atmosphere and maybe it's isolated in the grand scheme of things like the planet itself, but you're constantly surrounded by people. I give it an Akinar.
Screw you.
6, this is very plot oriented, it gets a Cirrus.
Oh, yes!
7, this is mostly inventory based puzzles, so it gets an Akinar.
Screw you.
I didn't really see this thing being called a Myst clone anywhere else, so it is kind of weird to do this. But no, it's not a Myst clone. Overall, this might be my favorite entry of the series. The only drawbacks are the graphics, and it's proof that artistic direction is better, as I vastly prefer the aesthetic of the second part. Fortunately, you don't need to play all 3 parts to get a sense of the story. They are connected by lore, so play whichever one looks interesting to you. I guess this Titanic journey is about to end, and well, hopefully we won't get hit by an iceberg or anything like that, but then again, we're in space, so there's no ice. Oh god, an asteroid.
Maybe with that asteroid I'm finally free of hipsters. I guess not. Ta-la!